This is the ultimate centrist bit. So these guys are reactionaries, by the way, like definitely. But this is what I was thinking of when I was making a joke about that, making that joke. Like this is actually, what do you call it? This is actually from a bunch of reactionary. This is an exaggerated version of that when centrists do this, but it is. You know what? I'm just gonna play it because it is kind of true, especially in the circumstance with the Smithsonian thing that we're talking about.
I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
So the reason why I think this is like hyper centrist and annoying is because that does happen in like super woke circles, but also at the same time, like your racial identity is important, especially because it indicates, when you think about it from the lens of history, it indicates that you have been subjected to so many additional struggles. It's socioeconomic conditions, certainly, but you have to realize how we got to those socioeconomic conditions to begin with. It's like looking at Africa and thinking that colonialism and slavery had nothing to do with Africa's current condition. Like, you have to look at it. You have to look at the history and how we got here. Of course it's going to happen. So yeah. So from that point of view, I think a racial signifier is still significant, but whenever people go too far with it, they do sound kind of like the racist people.
We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Come on, that one's funny. That's literally... I'm sorry, but that's a literal straw man. Okay, some hyper woke people do say like this. Come on. Even though this guy is a reactionary.
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
I've never seen a leftist say this. It's always libs. I mean, I think there is a collection of radical people, like very woke people, that are constantly on a path to making things, I guess, more ethical or more sustainable or better overall for everyone else. And they engage in what I call overcorrective behavior. And that's it. There are definitely liberals who say like this, though. There's people in my community that probably had takes like this in the past. Right, and still do. People still get mad at me every now and then. But of course, it is literally satire. So yelling straw man at a satirical piece of comedy is psychotic.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in. Black people should only shop at black businesses.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Why are you using woke as a pejorative? Because woke in the current vernacular is someone who has adopted a totally commoditized, totally co-opted version of social justice that oftentimes is performative and doesn't take the necessary material steps beyond that, and doesn't ever really have any sort of policy prescriptions beyond just saying like racism is bad, and you know, it's all about representation. We need more black billionaires. That's why I use woke as a pejorative in this circumstance. People call themselves woke malding. Yeah. And I say this as someone who's been called woke bae from BuzzFeed's very own reporting. Hasn't it just become that through rhetoric used by conservatives? you got to take a little bit of ownership, man. Like, we got to take some ownership of our side. I think that there are always criticisms. We can always improve. And I think that the criticism from a liberal point of view is that we definitely do overcorrect. We definitely do get. Sometimes we engage in like just a total lapse of logic when we're looking at certain issues. Like, there were so many people that got mad at me during the Jussie Smollett, where I was like, something smells weird about this situation. Like, I remember having this conversation. People were like, even after they came out and said, like, yeah, I think this was hired by Jussie himself, there were people in my community that were like, come on, you're gonna believe the Chicago Police Department? And it's like, I mean, come on. Like, you can admit that even black liberals or whatever can be bad from time to time. Just because someone is from a marginalized community doesn't mean like I understand having looking into situations, looking into those sorts of circumstances a little bit more with an open mind, right? But this notion, I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to the Chicago Police Department in that circumstance. I was ultimately right to be suspicious about it. The reason why I was suspicious about it wasn't because of the Chicago Police Department. The reason why I was suspicious about it is because a guy wearing a MAGA hat running around in the middle of Chicago at like, oh yeah, I literally watched a discussion you had with Michael last night about this. You said the one thing that made you so sketched out was that he claimed he was getting Subway at 3 a.m. Yeah, that was a joke. But the real sketch me out about it is the fact that these like super hypers with a MAGA hat rolling around Chicago that also somehow knew a B-list celebrity from a black soap opera on television. Like, come on, are you kidding me? That's what I said at the time. I was like, this is a little weird. And people got mad at me back then. And even the Drake that we were talking about, I was like, some stuff is... Anyway, let's keep going. Let's watch this. Now that we went on a tangent where it is always concerning that despite the obvious asymmetry and difference that woke people say about race naively parallels racist ideology. If you need political education to see the difference, it's going to be socially and politically toxic. It is importation of a sectarian mode of politics. What will you do for my people? Yeah. Are we supposed to shun working class bigots, or do we let them in a class struggle like we ultimately need in order to reach socialism? Okay. This is a really complicated situation to get into, but bigotry in the working class is still a sectarian division in the working class, because the working class isn't exclusively white people. There is a gigantic chunk in the working class that have disabilities, are black, brown, from different ethnic backgrounds. So, like, this notion that we have to let racism happen so that we can engage in solidarity is silly. But we also need to understand that this is a constant struggle, and you have to educate people. I focus on a more I focus on a positive approach of trying to educate people, but that doesn't mean that I always let people get away with racist. I don't.